So you had a box, and then what happened in small boxes on the screen?
Well, they weren't, you know,
All right,
like
okay,
that, yeah.
right.
So there was a sine wave that went through it. It was like a 360-degree sine wave,
Yeah.
180 degrees below the middle line and 180 degrees above the middle line. And the goal was, and this is as it was told to me, the goal was to flatten that sine wave.
All right.
And of course, you know, I had a question like, how am I going to, I don't understand what, he said, just listen to the tone and mentally hum it. Just continue to do that and it'll go from there. So I just took the instruction at face value and I just did that. It took about 4 days, but then finally something, and I write in the book about how it clicked, but it wasn't an audible click. It was just my way of describing what happened. It kind of just went like that, and it actually happened where the line flickered a little bit.
Yeah.
And so, of course, that was shocking to me because here I am manipulating something on the screen that I have no connection to.
No physical connection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Other than the headphones, and of course, you know, but
Yeah.
that there was nothing there. It was just a headphone.
Can I just interrupt you there, Dan?
Sure.
When I heard that part, I thought, well, the computer technology is possibly N.S.A. conventional Earth-based technology. So I thought there's maybe the device that's actually sensing your mind is then interfaced somehow to the computer.
Yeah.
So it's some interfacing
I assume
device.
that too. I assume that too.
But you were never shown that. It wasn't a
No,
box
no.
or a.
For all I know, it could have been an alien that was somehow interfaced with the computer to do that.
Right.
I don't know.
But you weren't shown any of that. So could you actually see the tower, or was it a tower?
No. I just saw the monitor.
Just the monitor. So you couldn't see any of the other technology. None of that's on display.
No.
Okay. All right.
Which of course is frustrating if you're a curious person.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, the line flickered, and I felt the sensation that I would later come to know as a COM, or intuitive communications.
Just for viewers, a COM is short for communication.
Yeah.
That way.
Yeah, we called it comms, receiving comms.
Mm-hmm.
It happened, and then I just continued to practice that and continued to mentally hum that tone to the point where I think what it was is it was strengthening this muscle in my mind that didn't, it was not there or barely there, and it was starting to strengthen it, and then it started to take over and knew what to do. Okay. It's the only really way I can describe it, because it's not like a book learning where you learn one section and then you learn chapter 2 and then you learn chapter 3. It just started to grow on itself. So eventually I was able to flatten the entire line of the first box, and then I went on to the second box, and it was a different tone for that one, and then it just replicated itself. The first box, second box, third box,
and were these just kind of standard musical type tones like middle C or bottom F kind of thing, and they were slightly different in pitch?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
So you then could flatten the second line, and there was 10 boxes altogether.
Yeah. So I had to. My initial lessons were to flatten each line separately, and then it went from there to flattening two lines in two boxes at the same time.
Simultaneously.
Yeah, and then 3.
Like playing a chord almost.
Exactly.
Right.
Although, and I use, I described the tone. There's a tone being played, but that was only to unlock what was going on. It had nothing to do with audible types of things. It had nothing to do with that.
Yeah,
In the final form, it didn't have anything to do with that.
So then you had control over 10 lines then. And then what happened?
Well, they started to feed me images, like videos and still images of just various things.
On the terminal?
Yeah, on the terminal. And then I would...
was this a window on the terminal and the other 10 boxes were still there?
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
But what would happen is I would receive the communication about that particular image or video, and I could see...
So hang on, you said receive. prior to this, you are outputting information, and that's having an effect. So you're saying that information was now starting to come back.
Exactly. But it was. It's the same.
Right.
It's the same thing, really,
Right.
because the sensation is there in your mind to
Right.
generate it, and it's there in your mind to receive it. So
Right.
it's the same.
Okay.
Same medium, I guess you could say.
Right. Right.
But
a bit like plucking a guitar string. You can either, I guess, it's sort of externally being plucked, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, okay.
You can do either one. You can listen to it or you can play it, but
Yeah.
you know what it is.
Yeah.
But again, we can't get into the sound
No.
analogies because there was no sound
Yeah,
involved. But
yeah.
although, you know, when I say there's no sound involved, I could receive the data of a sound and understand what it translated into in my human senses.
Yeah.
But there was no physical sensation in the ear, I guess you can say.
Right. So they're feeding you various pictures, and what are they saying that the combination of box 1, 3, and 5 makes a tank?
Well, you know, at this point, it wasn't a one-to-one correlation that I was applying to the lesson. It was more of, it was just feeding me the information, and that muscle was learning on its own.
Right.
I could see in my peripheral vision when I was looking at the video or the picture, I could see the boxes going, you know, just doing all kinds of stuff. But I wasn't looking at the boxes and going, okay, that assigns that, and that. No, I wasn't doing that. It's just the mind was learning on its own.
I feel like when you hear a word, you don't think of all the letters in it. You just know the word.
Yeah, exactly. But in that analogy, you had to actually learn the letters first, which is the boxes that I was going through.
Right.
Actually, it would be more of not letters, but concepts and ideas, actually.
So, okay, I can
kinda hard to
understand
explain.
how it could show you different pictures of images and say, that picture represents this combination or this perhaps pattern of or combination of tone. Which is a word I'm actually looking for. I'm trying to think.
Yeah, I know. It's hard to put
profile, shall we say, of combinations.
But you know, even within that analogy, you have to look at. It wasn't the rest period or the resting of where that tone was or that line. Later on, we get away from tones, but the line, it actually corresponded also to the rate of change of that line, of that sine wave.
Right.
So it didn't necessarily mean this means this means that, but it means this means that, and this means that. Right. The motion, the actual rate of change. Right. So it was an infinite amount of information that could be
conveyed.
Yeah.
Right. So how did it teach you more subtle concepts which can't be represented in a picture? Such as, I don't know, happiness or...
Through the pictures and images, you could convey happiness and things like that through the picture.
Right.
So I don't think there was anything that needed a specifically different input to get that learning. Essentially, they had programmed it or they had designed all the images and all the videos and all that stuff to actually unlock everything that needed to be unlocked within the comments.
Now, do you think that was the people who wrote the software for that, and that education software, you might call it? Do you think that was all humans doing that, or do you think it was a combination of alien?
I hadn't really never thought of it. I would imagine that it would have to have had some alien input. I mean,
and some human input, possibly.
Yeah. Well, the hardware and all that stuff. I think it had to be. Had to be a joint effort, I would believe.
Right. All right. So with the knowledge that at some point you were going to be used for something, because you got quite frustrated about all that, didn't you?
Yeah, it was very frustrating later on when I became operational and things started to happen.
But you were on hold kind of thing.
Yeah, I was on hold. Once I graduated from the school, I went back to my regular base. And I was just told when I left by my control person for that project. He said, at some point in the future, I will be introducing you to your next control officer, and then you will do your job as the intuitive communicator as well. So I just had to sit and wait. I went back to my base. I got orders to go to another base, which turned out to be the first base that I would be operational as a IC. But that was several months in waiting. So I was just kind of, I never knew from one moment to the next when I would actually start doing this.
And just as an aside, did you ever see any other technology around the place, like test equipment or monitoring equipment?
Well, there was always equipment around my workplace that had to do with my my regular job.
But
so nothing that I would, no, there was nothing other than the monitor, which doubled as my regular monitor for my regular job,
Right.
but I would use that to open up the window to report comms.
Now, some people might describe what you've been given as training in telepathy. Would you describe it as that?
Well, from what I've read about telepathy, it has some similarities. I think it's much more complex.
Telepathy is, or this is?
The intuitive communication.
Right.
I think
Do you think it's using the same muscle as you describe it?
I really cannot.
You don't know?
I can't say
Something
that.
in the brain, though.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it has to do with the brain, but it also, telepathy is not necessarily something that's two-way. It's just a sensing or whatever. I guess it could be two-way,
Right.
depending on the.
Now, just to get to the technical side of things, electromagnetic communications and communication down wires travel at the speed of light. Did you get any feeling as to that this was the same?
I don't think it's the same. I think that the medium or the transmission or whatever you want to call it, I don't think it actually. I think it broke the bounds of physics.
Right. So,
I don't think
it
it
could be
applied.
interdimensional then.
Yeah, I don't think it
Because
applied to physics.
Yeah, because if you've got a point over here or over there in 3 dimensions, in a 4th dimension, it could be right next to each other. If it's using another dimension, which is impossible to conceive of.
It gets very esoteric, obviously, but I don't believe that it was of our laws that we recognize as physics.
Right. All right. Now, you mentioned that this was a grey project, and you've attached to that it has input from aliens. Why necessarily should that mean that it's alien, that it was grey project?
Sure. I guess you'd have to ask the people that invented that term.
Right.
I don't know. When I was initially brought into the program, they referred to it as a slant mission. They referred to it as a gray. So
But
I
they
don't know
also
the
told you
reason.
that aliens were involved.
Yeah, they when he described the onion effect with the security classifications, he mentioned that the black projects, were at a certain level, and then gray projects, which have to do with alien technology, research and development, or communication. Any of those things, they were classified as a gray project.
Right. Okay. And did they tell you at all where these aliens were from?
No.
None of that.
No locations.
Or how long they'd been here?
No.
At least 1947, then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I did during my. We'll probably talk about it a little bit, but during my communications, I did ask some questions directly, and I got the sense that they had been here for a very long time.
Really?
Yeah, on Earth for a very long time.
But not directly communicating with.
No, not necessarily. Although they could have been,
Right.
but I didn't get the sense either way of whether they were communicating early on or not.
And what do you think about theories of people such as Bob Lazar has mentioned that they have actually tinkered with our genetics in the past several times?
I firmly believe that. I got that impression as well.
Really?
From a question that I had asked. I believe that at some point in our history they have intermingled with our DNA.
Right.
And I think that possibly is part of why we can even be, this project could even exist.
Right.
Because we have maybe a portion of their DNA.
Right. Now, you said that you were enhanced genetically in the early stages in the womb. How much? Do you have a feel as to
No.
whether it was you were 1% and they made it to 100%? Or
No.
do you have any feel as to whether there are people who wouldn't need that enhancement, who just naturally might have that ability?
Well, I don't think that could be this particular ability because they they would not have needed to do the genetic management procedure. They would just had to have found whoever it was that had that particular heightened whatever they needed for the project. So the fact that they had to be proactive and do something leads me to believe that, no, that's...
Right. And are you aware of the Greada Treaty, this 1954 alleged meeting with President Eisenhower and some E.T.s?
I'm aware of that. I mean, I've read about that particular event. I didn't correlate it with that name, but yeah.
Well, I'll just touch on something that this is alleged to have been agreed,
Sure.
and that is that allegedly what happened was that concern was expressed that the aliens had been carrying out abductions, and that the U.S. military said to them, look, we want to know who you're abducting, where they're being taken from, we want lists, etc. So I've actually just made the assumption that you receiving the abduction reports is possibly them agreeing that they're part of that agreement.
That's an interesting correlation. I had never really thought of that, but that's entirely possible, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because if they had agreed to provide information,
Yeah.
then perhaps the aliens thought, well, we're not going to pass it to you via ancient EM comms. We're going to do it with our method.
Yeah, well, before the Project Preserve Destiny, if they were doing it before then, they'd had to find a different messenger, I guess. But
Right.
yeah,
So-
I think
so
that's entirely possible. Yeah.
Now, from people who I've interviewed who have bumped into people working in, one particular secret group in the UK, they allege that it's the N.S.A. who controls some of our GCHQ listening bases of UFOs. And I've heard from one guy who's supposed to be in some special forces team that the people who are monitoring UFO activity actually get heads-up information from somewhere. They know what nights they're going to be here on, in other words, and they know where they're going to be. Do you think that kind of information could be being passed through similar methods?
Well, I believe that the information that I was getting actually was test information, not necessarily fictitious information, but stuff that it could be happening, but they selected it based on just keeping my talent alive and thriving, and you know, like a muscle, you just got to work it.
Right.
So I don't think the content was necessarily important content. It was just content that needed to be passed, and why not pass it through them, because they need the muscle, you know, exercising.